Queen Victoria, buried beside her servant. The Empress, the corpse, and the secret she took to her grave. The final chapter of a long black-veiled life. Queen Victoria's death wasn't just the end of a monarch, it was the end of an entire era, a seismic shift in culture, grief, etiquette, empire, and yes, burial habits. She had lived so long and ruled so fiercely that most of her subjects couldn't remember a time without her, and when she finally died in 1901, they thought they knew what to expect. A royal funeral, a solemn farewell, a monarch sent off in the style of her predecessors. But Victoria? She had other ideas. Because her death wasn't a ceremony, it was a final performance, and behind the veils, the titles, and the ever-present widowhood, she had one last scandal to unleash from beyond the grave, a secret burial beside a man who wasn't her husband, at least not officially. A life spent in mourning and micromanaging. Victoria had ruled for 63 years, outlived most of her children, seen off dozens of prime ministers, and mourned harder than anyone before or after her. When Prince Albert died in 1861, Victoria was only 42. And instead of recovering, she simply never did. She withdrew from public life, wore black for the rest of her life, and turned mourning into an institution. She made it clear this wasn't just sadness, this was sacred. She memorialized Albert everywhere, statues in every town square, portraits hung in every room, a death mask displayed in her private apartments, and a ritual of daily grief, his clothes laid out, his shaving water prepared, his place set at table, for decades. This is the woman who later buried her dog with its favorite cushion, who insisted her children's spouses be buried close but not too close, and who once said, "We are not amused," especially, apparently, when it came to dying without leaving a very specific to-do list. The death scene at Osborne House. Victoria died on January 22, 1901, at Osborne House, her beloved getaway on the Isle of Wight. She passed away in the arms of her grandson, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. Yes, that Kaiser Wilhelm, and surrounded by a roomful of weeping family, courtiers, and the occasional gossipy lady-in-waiting. But Victoria wasn't just dying, she was curating. Long before her death, she had given explicit instructions about what was to happen to her body, where it would go, what it would wear, what would go in the coffin, and exactly who shouldn't get involved. There was even a little black notebook tucked away among her things, with pages dedicated to burial instructions, because of course there was. And those instructions? Well, they raised eyebrows, dropped jaws, and caused absolute chaos for Edward VII and the royal family left behind. Her royal burial playlist. Victoria's funeral wasn't meant to be Victorian. Despite being the poster for 19th century grief, Victoria didn't want a black-draped, doom-laden tear fest of a funeral. Instead, she asked for no black horses, black plumes, or black mourning dress for the guards. No elaborate lying in state. She didn't want the fuss or the press. No embalming if it could be helped. A white veil, not a black one, covering her face, and a coffin sealed quickly. She was tired of grief, and in her final act she wanted peace, not pageantry. Well, mostly. The strangest funeral packing list in royal history. Victoria's burial instructions were morbidly specific. You'd be forgiven for thinking she wanted to take half the Victorian era with her into the grave. The items she asked to be buried with included her white wedding veil, the same one she wore to marry Prince Albert in 1840, a plaster cast of Albert's hand, Albert's dressing gown wrapped around her body like a final hug, a lock of her mother's hair, a handkerchief that belonged to her daughter Alice, who died in 1878, dozens of charms and mourning lockets, some containing hair from the deceased, a ring given to her by John Brown's mother, worn on her left hand like a wedding band. And then there was the photo, the one everyone wanted to ignore. A small portrait of John Brown, the rough-tongued Scottish gillie who had been her personal servant, closest friend, and, if rumour is to be believed, secret husband. Who was John Brown? Really? Let's rip open the tartan truth. John Brown was hired by Prince Albert as an outdoor servant and horse handler at Balmoral Castle. After Albert's death, Brown became Victoria's shadow, support system, and, according to her children, nuisance. He slept outside her bedroom door for years. He drank whiskey, told her when she was being difficult, and called her woman instead of ma'am, and she absolutely adored him. "My dear, faithful Brown, the comfort of my life," she wrote. Victoria had a miniature of Brown's face in a locket. She had locks of his hair, kept beside Albert's. She had a statue of him made, without permission, on royal grounds. Her family hated him. Her ministers feared him. The newspapers mocked him. But Victoria didn't care. Even when Brown died in 1883, she wrote about it as if her heart had shattered all over again. And in her private papers, she once referred to him as "my dear husband." Official? No. Emotional? Undeniably. The family's meltdown. When Edward VII opened the notebook and saw the name John Brown, not once, not twice, but several times, he was reportedly furious. He tried to stop the photo from going into the coffin. He tried to destroy all trace of Brown from the Queen's record. He definitely ordered the burning of Brown's letters and some of Victoria's personal diaries from the period. But in the end, he honoured her instructions. Sort of. The photo of John Brown was wrapped in flowers, placed in her left hand and hidden beneath the veil. It was Victoria's final act of defiance, and Edward's final act of loyalty. Or maybe just his final act of gritted teeth compliance. Enter the Royal Mausoleum. Queen Victoria was laid to rest at Frogmore in the private royal mausoleum she had built decades earlier for Prince Albert. It's a domed, Italianate, somewhat crumbling structure on the grounds of Frogmore House, closed to the public due to structural instability, or maybe just too many ghosts. Inside, Victoria and Albert lie side by side in matching sarcophagi made of white marble. The inside is over the top in true Victorian fashion. Frescoes of angels, biblical murals, Latin inscriptions, and a creepy level of post-mortem romance. But here's the twist. That beautiful tomb? It was meant to be Albert's alone. Victoria just invited herself in when she died, years later. She'd spent her whole widowhood trying to be close to him, and in the end, she literally muscled into his tomb. A secret still buried. To this day, the photo of John Brown remains in that sealed coffin. So does the lock of his hair, and the ring, and the secrets. We will never know exactly what their relationship was. Historians argue about it constantly. Were they married in secret by a Scottish priest? Was it a platonic obsession? Was she simply desperate for affection and he for power? But one thing is clear. Victoria wanted him with her in death as he was in life. Close, hidden, but essential. What her burial says about her. Victoria's burial wasn't just about where she lay. It was about who she was and who she wanted remembered. She wanted the empire to grieve, but not too dramatically. She wanted her children to follow orders, but not ask questions. She wanted to control her legacy from inside the coffin. And maybe she wanted a final say in a life where she'd always been watched, judged, and hemmed in by protocol. Queen Victoria, Empress of India, ruler of a quarter of the globe, didn't just go quietly into that long royal night. She went buried under secrets, veiled in white, gripping the image of a man she was never allowed to love publicly, but chose to carry forever. And that, dear viewer, is why the Royal Mausoleum stays closed, because even in death, Victoria's scandal is very much alive.